like 15 million people in my area were sleeping in every empty lot. That was the beginning of social conscience. I looked at store windows, there were phonographs, you know, the old thing you wind up. There were all kinds of things available, but they didn't have money. They were good people. They made shacks. And at the same time, I read there was going to be a bonus march on Washington by the veterans of World War I. That's years after the war. The government promised soldiers $600, but they didn't have the money at the time to give these millions of guys $600. So they marched on Washington with their uniforms, medals, crutches, wheelchairs, and they were sleeping in every empty lot around the Capitol. Well, I was a kid in Washington watching that. And General Douglas MacArthur, I don't know if you ever heard of him, he was a captain then. He said, the Senate said, get those guys out of here, it doesn't look good. So he ordered them to leave, and they said, not until we get our bonus. So he had his troops throw tear gas at them, and that bothered me, no end.
Well, they were tear gassing soldiers.
Yes, tear gassing veterans.
Yeah, because
wanted their bonus that the government promised them.
Yeah.
And then I said to myself, this shit's got to go. It would look very bad to me.
Yeah.
Because there was stuff around. Farmers grew food, but people didn't have the money to buy it, so their crops were rotting away. And I noticed at that time it was a depression. Now, you'll have to take my word for it because you weren't around then. There were people up on soapboxes with an American flag and a Nazi flag talking about the Nazi point of view.
Yeah.
There was socialists, communists, Mankind United, all kinds of people talking of new ideas. It was the depression that stimulated that.
Yeah.
Well, they lost confidence in their elected leaders.
Kind of like we have now.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I was standing in front of a communist speaking, and he said, beat it, Sonny. Because I was just 16 or so. It was all adults. No kids weren't interested in that. But I was standing there, and he said, I told you to beat it. I said, I want to hear what you've got to say. He said, why? Because I don't believe what the Democrats say about the Republicans and what the Republicans say about Democrats. I want to hear from a communist what communism is. He says, you can stay.
Yeah.
So an hour later, he said to me, I said to him rather, I want to ask you 1,000 questions. He said, you have to go to the YCL. I said, what's that? He said, Young Communist League. I said, where are they? He gave me an address. And I went there, and there were kids, boys and girls, 10 years to 17, and they were reading books like Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. The kids were not typical. They were different than normal.
Yeah.
They were much brighter. And so I waited till the meeting was over, and I raised my hand and said, how are you going to prevent corruption when communism comes in? And how are you going to house the masses? He said, well, when that time comes, we'll work on it. I said, look, it sounds very humane. Let's start a technical branch of the Communist Party and work on mass housing. They said, you're a deviationist. I said, what's that? You're deviating from the teachings of Marx. I said, I'm trying to help. I'd help anybody.
Yeah, but you weren't sticking along with the dogma, with the kind of program. You weren't sticking along with their dogma. That's why you were a threat.
I said, how are you going to do this? And they said, when that time comes, we'll work on it. And I suggested, let's work on it now. So he said, you'll have to leave. You're deviating from Marx. But the vice president of the Young Communist League said, let's hear him out. And they kicked us both out. Now, this guy was dumb, I think, because I was only going to help anybody. Yeah. Anyway, after they kicked us out, that was the time I hitchhiked to California. And this woman driving the car, descriptively, she must have weighed over 300 pounds. Brand new car. Big hat with cherries and feathers. That was normal when I was a kid. So she opened the door part of the way. She said, are you a Christian? I said, what else? She said, get in. So she let me in the car, and I fell asleep because I haven't slept for days walking on the road. And she poked me in the ribs. She really did hurt me. She said, not sleeping in my car. I said, what do you want me to do? I want you to sing all the way to Texas. I said, what do you want me to sing? Jesus loves me, that I know, of course the Bible tells. I had to sing all the way to Texas, but I realized that as a religious person, she didn't understand what she was reading.
Yeah.
She didn't understand the Bible.
Sure.
When I got to California, I went to where the airplane said their jobs, and there were hundreds of people there. And the guy said, "Will you work for 8 cents an hour? Will you work for 7 cents an hour?" And picked the low bidders. And that was very cruel to me. So I hitchhiked to one of the aircraft factories, and I was about, I'd say, nearly 18. And I said, "I'd like a job." They said, "Are you a draftsman, an engineer? You understand aerodynamics?" I said, "No." I said, "We can't hire you. You're even a high school graduate." I said, "That's true." So I showed him my drawings, and he said, "You're hired." I said, "What do you want me to do?" "Just think up ideas." I said, "What are your problems?" He said, "Well, when a big plane lands," I'm giving you detail, the big tires sometimes cost $10,000 a piece on a Ford Trimotor or a Condor, and the tires wear out fast. So I put vanes on the side of the wheel. When the landing gear, when you were in the air, the wheel would turn. If a landing gear was retractable, when they straightened out, the wheels were turned by the vanes on the side.
Yeah, so they'd already be spinning, there'd be less rub, when they hit the ground, yeah.
Everything I thought of belonged to that company. I worked there for some time. And the guy said, "The first 3 weeks you were here, Jacque, you made more contributions to the aircraft industry than the history of aviation." That's a chief draftsman. And he said to me, "How do you think up all these things?" I said, "That's a long story." So he invited me to his home for dinner, and I explained it. He says, "I want you to meet the chief aerodynamicist. That's a guy that studies airflow over wings and around surfaces." So he told him that I did not believe in the Bernoulli principle. Do you know what that is?
No.
Air flowing over the top of the wing covers a greater distance and creates a partial vacuum.
So it creates
and
lift.
2/3 of the lift comes from the top of the wing, not the bottom. So I built a model wing to test that out. In order to deflect air up this way, you have to take a download in the wing. Do you understand? If air hits and gets deflected that way, if you hold a racket at an angle,
you'd think it would push the wing down.
That's the resultant. So you get nothing for nothing.
Yeah.
I was telling Ford, the guy that hired me, that I didn't accept the Bernoulli principle. He told that to the chief aerodynamicist, and he came over to me and says, "You don't accept the Bernoulli principle?" I said, "No, I don't accept certain aspects of it." He says, "I don't even want to talk to you." And he walked away. Very famous guy, Dr. Klein. And that's the first time I encountered a scientist that was unscientific.
Yeah.
He should have said, "What is it you have against it?" If he was scientific, he'd try to help me if I were wrong. And so I began to say, "Gee, if a scientist behaves like that, then I mustn't honor scientists. I have to check them out, each one of them." I said, "That's a tough job." So I got into a field called general semantics. The book is called Science and Sanity by Alfred Korzybski. He began to tell me that words people use are not information. They're just names they get in school. And that book really made me aware of language, communication. So I began to study semantics, followed by another book called Tyranny of Words by Stuart Chase. That would help you if you're really interested in the history of language. So I got Mind in the Making by James Harvey Robinson, How We Get to Be the Way We Are. And all of those books were based on experiment, not armchair philosophy. So I became highly experimental. Following that, I was working on a certain airplane called the DB-7, Douglas Bomber 7. And I didn't work on the bombing mechanisms. They always asked me to, so I don't know how to do that. Only safety devices for aircraft. And that plane had a tendency, I built a model of it, and put it in a spin tunnel, and it went into a spin right away. Instead of a diving spin, it was a flat spin. And the aerodynamics book said that most flat spins are fatal. Planes do not pull out. So I went to work on that problem and showed Ford, if you turn your wingtips this way, you can stop a flat spin. He said, "Great, I'm going to take out a patent on it." in the name of Douglas Division of Northrop Aircraft.
Rather than in the name
Not
of Jacque
you.
Fresco, yeah.
Yeah. Everything you think of, whether you're home or not,